Hello everyone, welcome to AI Tech Share meeting event and AI Behind the Head. And this Tech Share meeting event is held by AICUG. I'm Florence Wang, the founder of AICUG. Actually, AICUG was established in 2018 March, and now it's one of the largest AI community in China. But we are aiming to become the largest community in the world. It's quite ambitious. So in that case, our motto actually is we would like to spread AI knowledge, and we believe AI knows no borders. And in that case, such as this kind of AI Tech Share event we have held in China and here about like 100 times. So if you would like to see other episodes before previous meetings, you can go to www.aicug.cn because you can see the online streaming, all these things. And also you can follow us in Meetup and in WeChat group and in LinkedIn. We will have this kind of monthly event in the future. And today, so before we started, I would like to say thank you for our partner and the sponsorship, Fly High Thailand, because without them, I cannot find such a great venue. So please allow me to introduce Maggie Fly High. Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Maggie from Fly High Group, and welcome you guys to come to our flight here, and we are honored to host the event for tonight. So let me do a short introduction of our company. So we are a recruiting company, as you guys can see, but we own this flighting shop, which we have this shop to support the professional workshops. So if you we specialize in bilingual talent. So if anyone wants looking for a new job, or you guys need talents, or if you like your job but you don't like your colleagues, maybe feel free to talk to me. I might be able to find your colleague a new job. So hope everyone enjoy tonight and enjoy our flight. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. And so please allow me to introduce our first speaker, Minghuan Liu. Dr. Minghuan has 15 years working in experience. His expertise including speech recognition, NLP, machine learning, and he has led several research teams such as eBay, Microsoft, Garmin, and now he is the head of data science at Apple. And today he will talk about improve and quality and efficiency developing human annotated training data. Welcome, Minghuan.
Thank you, Florence. Thank you everyone for joining today's share. I'm come from Appen. So Appen is a company who provide human annotated data for machine learning and artificial intelligence. So today's topic, I'm trying to talk about, excuse me for the technical details here. Today I'm going to talk about how we can use machine learning mechanism to develop high quality and also improve the efficiency to deliver those annotation data for our big clients. So a brief introduction about Appen. So Appen is a global leader in developing the high quality human annotated data set for machine learning and artificial intelligence. So it can support the data for audio, video, image, text, and other data sets. For example, the LiDAR data set for self-driving cars. And a few fun statistics about Appen company. So we have experience working with over 130 countries to cover our clients to deploy their marketing in those countries and the regions. And also, we have expertise to work in over 180 different languages. And we have over 20 plus years to work with global leading technology companies to help them to develop the training data set and collect training data set for those languages and those regions. So over those years, we have built up curated professional crowd workers, contracted for them, over 1 million of them. And they are high skilled and they are very flexible to working. So it's not our official employee, but it's our contractor. So we also, over the years, we deliver over 3 billion of the judgment, and also over 500 hours of audio data get annotated by our. But the company itself is quite small. Actually, it's only 500 people globally at 9 different offices. And most recently, we acquired another data annotation provider in industry, which is called Figure 8. Previously called the Flower. So that company now is become part of the Aptix. So the service we can offer to our customers is that first we can offer the consultation service. So whenever you have a need of data, either to collect data or analyze data, and we can provide specific project manager to work with you to understand your business need, and then from end to end to develop the annotation guidelines to what kind of metrics you want to achieve, and very detailed walkthrough, very customizable for your solution. So it's a service company instead of like a product-based company. So Another service we can provide is the content moderate. So we can help you to protect your brand by monitoring your user-generated data in your website. So that, for example, if you want to protect your brand by monitoring whether people publish some like hatred speeches or inadverse undesired content, you can scale your own moderated team with our local workers, so that they can know the language and they can know the culture much better than your product team, and then we help you to protect your brand. So that's another service we can provide. And the third, the biggest service we can provide is data annotation. So if you have a large amount of annotated data, you need annotation and used to train your machine learning models. We can help you with that across different language and across different locales. And also, if you have a kind of like cold start problem for your machine learning or AI solutions, you don't have any data at all, but you want to build your systems. So where you can get this data, we can help you to collect the real users' data, go to those regions, go to those language, and use these skilled workers to narrow down into your scenario. So we can help you to develop the guidelines so that our worker can generate data for you, like audio, video, image, either text, or those things. So, and also before you launch your product to your specific language or locale, we can help you to do the field testing before your launch, so that we can ask our experienced in-locale, in-country contractors to test out your product, so that you can have very satisfied testing result instead of like you just office food with your own employees. So this one is also proven, has been proven very effective. If you want to launch your machine learning or AI solutions to other regions, other locales to achieve satisfactory results. So, and also we have a very strong linguistic team to be able to help you to generate your linguistic level, different language level of the expertise. And also personalization. So we can have very highly skilled, trained workers to generate very personalized from their own perspective and based on their own language, culture, and insights, so can provide segmentation of the personalization experience for you. So other service like security service. So if your data have very big concern of like privacy or security, for example, the police department, their witness data or the court level of the legal data. So you have a very concerned about protect the privacy and the security. So we can provide a very secure solution for you. Our worker can pass your security clearance background checking, and also they can go into a very locked, secure, locked facility so that they can annotate the data, and then also they comply all those ISO 9001 standard and 20001 of those security certified procedures, so that you don't need to worry about the loss of the security and the privacy of your data. And also we provide very strong the speech data transcription service and translation service. So so that's the over the years. So we cover our solutions for technology industry, the retail industry, automotive industry, healthcare, government, and financial service. So I'll give you a few typical AI solution scenarios that you can think about to collect the data through our service. So like for example, speech recognition, the customer relationship management, computer vision, data analytics, e-commerce, and fraud data detection, and in-car infotainment and navigation, machine translation, medical image, and also risk management, and also proofing tools, for example, like to generate the spelling corrections or the grammars, those kind of vocabulary for different languages, different locales, and also, for example, the search relevance, social media, and virtual assistant or chatbot development for different applications. So that's the service we can provide. So as we already know that AI, the data is the fuel for the AI scenario. So Google already provide kind of studies that the more data you get, the AI performance, your machine learning systems performance you can achieve. And also, Agisanta did a very interesting study to study the breakthrough of past 30 years of AI advances. What he found is that the big breakthrough of AI solution is constrained actually by the high quality of data set instead of by the algorithm advances. So he studied all the major AI solutions across past 30 years, and he found the relationship that a very obvious pattern is that whenever the data set first available, the data set, high quality data set available, and then after every 3 years, you can see very big AI advantage breakthrough. Compared with algorithm, the first process of the algorithm, average is that only after 18 years of algorithm get first time proposed, you can see AI breakthrough. So these apply to not only like speech recognition area, but also like the IBM's Deep Blue area, and also the Google's machine translation, also the ImageNet. So all we can see the pattern consistencies at here. So we can see that the high volume human annotated and high quality training data is actually the biggest driver for the AI breakthrough. So then the challenge will become how we can efficiently and to develop a high quality training data set for our AI machine learning system. So the challenge you can experience here is that quality control for the human annotations. Human annotator, human as we know, we can make mistakes sometimes by unconscious or consciously. How we can do the quality control. The second is if there's a large amount of need of develop human annotated data set, how we can efficiently and quickly to generate those annotations to meet our timelines. The third challenge is that how we can manage those labeling costs so that you don't need to spend too many money on that. So there's as we can talk later, there's a lot of machine learning mechanisms there. We can do some tricks to improve the efficiency. And the third is that the data bias. So when you develop your machine learning systems, data bias actually is the biggest problem, and then sometimes not be aware of the company. For example, the distribution of your data maybe not fit in your actual deploy to end customers user scenario. Or when you develop a data set, you have a bias in your own data team or data science team, so that have a pre-assumption there which does not meet the actual customer's distribution or their need. So how you can to mitigate this data bias, we can help over there. And also the data security and then privacy, how you can make sure when you ask your cloud worker to annotate the data for you, how you can make sure the data is get protected, security, and they don't leak out. And also when you generate the annotation guidelines for your data, for your worker, how you can make sure there won't be any ambiguation happening over there, so that the annotation is actually what you need. It's not like interpreted wrongly by the workers. And also sometimes when you develop your training data set, sometimes your need may change. And how can you make sure you can quickly dynamic change these annotations to you apply it to your workers to get it. So, and also how you make sure your cloud worker, their qualification is good, they're qualified to do the annotation work for you. So, and also how you can detect the worker is not cheating when they work for you. For example, they build some smartly build some machine learning system, automatic annotate data for you, but the quality is not good. They can do it for example, manually pass your qualification, but when they do the real work, how if they are using some bot to do the annotation for you, how do you be able to detect that out and then sort that out, prevent this pollution? So all these kind of things is also not challenging when you're trying to develop a high quality, high volume, human annotated training data set for our clients' needs. So here is our Atom within the human-in-the-loop data generation platform to address a lot of these issues. So the flow is like this. So when a client have a request, they want some data collection job or some data annotation job, they send a request to us. And then our Athens human-in-the-loop data collection annotation platform, we will have a dedicated project manager to work with our client to help them to set up work template. And also we will have the workflow configuration there. And then we will study their job initial guidelines to the analytics, trying to remove any possible ambiguities in your annotation guidelines or data collection guidelines. And also we'll help you to remove any possible bias in your guidelines, so that to make sure the data you collected and the data you get annotated is free of those truths. So once we generate that, and we will, so under this, we have some machine learning model to be able to help our project manager to improve their efficiency, to generate this refine of job guidelines and also the refined job description. So after that, we will have access to our over 1 million creative cloud workers. So to build up this curated cloud workers, our cloud worker is not like Amazon Mechanic Turks. It's random pickup, people on and go, so it's low quality. Our curated workers, they have very strict, they are high skill trained, and also we do pass a lot of recruiting procedure, and they need to do a lot of testing, and also before they do work, start their actual work, we will onboard them to every client guidelines to make sure they understand the guidelines very clearly, and then we have a real-time coaching process to work with them to make sure they do the work correctly. And also in the back end, we have some machine learning model behind it to match the work with our workers' skill set, so that we can do a good job routing and job matching between the work and our selected workers. So if your data has special requirement like the privacy or the security requirement, we also have a dedicated flow to make sure selected high-skilled worker in our work pool, they can pass you security background checking. For example, some like defense department background checkings, or some the police background checkings, to make sure it meets your requirement. And also to make sure your sensitive data won't leak out, we can even send our worker to some like security facilities, so that they only work at there, so that you won't need to worry about your data get lost or get leaked out. So once we pass this match the worker and the work, so the worker can start at our tools, can start to do the annotation work. And during that time, we have a machine learning model work at the end, so that it can do the real-time coaching. So based on the hypothesis it's supposed to do, and which was generated by our machine learning models, and then to compare with what the workers do, and also compare with the instruction guideline to see whether you are offset or not. So we will have an interactive approach to coach our worker to onboard it, to make sure they comply with those guidelines.
PHP and High1R.
So, and also during this process, we can remove the bias, and also we can do the fraud detection, and based on all those mouse moving signals, your IP address, browser, those toolbar, all those signals, we can do these, and also your account information to do the quality tracking and fraud detection. And also we have built machine learning assisted annotation models, which can train from our hypothesis and to measure what is supposed to be and what you actually inputted, and then to measure the offset, and then to help our worker to provide all the suggestions, all the complete, all those features, so that the worker can do the annotation work more efficiently. So along this process, and we also build job insight analytics and worker insight analytics, so that we can build the profile for the work, for the job, and also for the data, so that all those things can be matched automatically in the future. And also we are using some active learning approach to spot out what's the most valuable data need to be annotated. By doing this, we can significantly save a lot of times. For example, to ensure the quality, sometimes you may need 2 workers to work the same batch of work, right? Which is very costly. But in some of the, if you can spot out what's the most important data set, then you can apply this more secure, strict approach, like 2 workers work on that. But for the remaining of the job, you can only ask 1 worker to work on that. So in that way, it can ensure you have good quality, but also you can reduce your cost for a lot. So once the data collection job get it, and also the data annotation job get it, and then we have certified quality assurance through the ISO standard, ISO 9001 procedure and ISO 20001, those certificates, to make sure before we deliver the final data set to our customer, it can meet all these requirements. If the quality measurement by the QA review based by this procedure doesn't meet our requirement, we will send back this data to our worker to rework it, to make sure data set quality meet these standards before we deliver to our client. So that's the whole procedure, what we propose, and then we use in our app. And then it has been proved very efficient and effective way, so that a lot of our big clients like the procedure. They are quite happy about our data delivery, and also they won't have any concerns about their sensitive data and their quality data. So this is the major here is the loop generation pipelines in our app. So thank you. If you have any questions regarding this procedure, you can have it.
I have a question.
Yes.
You had a bias removal from annotation. Do you also do bias removal from at the end of the whole process where, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I can see bias removal from annotation,
Yes.
but then you have a model and then
Mhm.
there may be bias in the final result of your client's
Yes.
model.
We have to do both. So one is annotation bias to make sure that our worker is balanced, so that not like most of the worker is coming from like one genre or one origin. So that's the annotation bias removal.
Right.
Another is data set, like when we receive the data from our client, we also will do kind of like bias data analytics.
Okay.
So make sure, like for example, classification, your different classes will be more balanced instead of like unbalanced. So this kind of thing. Yes.
I got just a question. Just, you talk about the quality of the data. A lot of people using things that the more data you have, the better it will go.
Mhm.
Usually, it's not the case. It's how the variety. How do you? I'm more curious about your quality matrix of the data, like how accurate the application will be and how variety of the data will be. It depends on what kind of application that your clients want.
Yes, that's a good question. So we have kind of like quality assessment assurance. So it's certified 9001. So basically, like we have follow this QA quality assurance procedure. So once our annotation have generated, we have another dedicated QA procedure. Two different people. They will randomly sample annotation, and then to make sure they check all those samples, and then the accuracy is following some confidence interval of some accuracy level. So if that worker, their work is below that confidence of the accuracy, and then all that worker's job will be discarded, and then we will reset to the back to the pool to let another worker do it or ask that worker to rework it. So by following this standard QA quality assurance, so we can make sure our data meet our client quality assurance. Another thing is regarding like the more data, right, improvement, and then the why you need like human annotated data. I think that's two-dimensional. So the more data, say, it's easier, for example, unlabeled data or weak unlabeled data, it's easy to get at lower cost, but you can get a lot of volume for that. It can help in your AI solution performance. But sometimes that boost up compared with high quality, less of the less amount of data, it's not comparable. So now the problem is that the more high quality data you have, you can have biggest improvement. So the question is how we can reduce the high quality human annotated data. So we have to be able to be smart at here. So like active learning approach have to be used there to reduce the cost, to make sure your quality is high and your volume is high, but the cost is low.
Does it answer the question like how much data should I collect?
I would say it depends on your application scenario. Yeah. So
you guys will give them
yeah,
like
yeah,
general
yeah,
guideline how much data is.
Yes, yes. We are based on the previous our experience. We can see like we have some general recommendation, and also depend the accuracy. For example, your speech recognition, right? If your application scenario is only like assuming your it's quiet environment and then the people using is standard, no accent over there, so maybe you just collect some of those kind of type of data, which is small amount is enough. But if you want to address like noisy environment and then your audience is like can speak a lot of accent or dialogue, those kind of things, so you will need much more data. Yes. So any other questions? Yes.
So we have an online question, which was basically how old is Up and or for how many years has it been funded?
To over 20 plus years.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you give some examples of what type of data these workers are looking at? Are they looking at pictures? Are they looking at text data? Are they looking at audio? And how are they annotating this so that you can run quality checks on it later? What are they actually doing?
So it depends on application. For example, text can be like, for example, the content relevance, right? So you have a search engine, for example, e-commerce search engine, and the people issue a query, and then your search engine result like is a title and the picture, and then the worker will be relevant. Whether my search query versus this title and this image, they're relevant or not. So for example, that's relevant. Another like audio, like transcription. So you have a clip of audio data coming from some telephone conversation, and then our worker will annotate. Which depend on the client's requirement. Sometimes you just only need to transcribe what the audios talk about. But sometimes clients may be more complex. Place a timestamp and at token level or word level or sentence level or speaker level at timestamp. Each word they talk about. So that's the audio. And then for the video, for example, you need to analyze like video. They present to our worker kind of like clip of video. So you just annotate, what this video talk about. You can just talk about like one line of sentence, like a cat is fired with sit or jumping some fence or something. This kind of like audio annotation. So it really depends on our applications. We can do support audio, video, text, and also images, and also sometimes even LiDAR.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Yuan. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Shahid Chishti. Shahid has 30 years experience in global cooperate in business. Our last speaker is Will Murphy. Will has been a software engineer and a corporate entrepreneur and a tech executive across a wide range of tech spaces. He was a co-founder of BoatChain and also founding VP of Tyler and SensorWare in FedEx. Actually, he is an expert in Internet of Things, in which field he holds lots of patents. And today, he will talk about hype and magic, turning AI into products. Welcome, Will.
Can I make just a really quick announcement? So before we begin,
Okay.
there is a YouTube channel. We are streaming this. In case some people cannot hear, especially in the back, that might help. Or also later, you'll be able to watch the entire stream. Because I understand the room can be a little bit limiting when it comes to, Thanks.
Thank you.
How do we find it?
Go to YouTube and just search for the name of the event with AICUG.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Thank you. Can I see a raise of hands? How many of you consider yourselves more technical than business? Technical people in the room? Are you all AI related? Some, yeah, about half. What about business? Do you consider yourself more on the business side? Awesome. Okay, we have a really good combination here. So my talk is more about my experiences on the business side working with AI, and thoughts about if you want to think about doing your own AI products, what you could think about. I'm not saying I'm totally correct, but I'm saying I've got some lessons learned and some thoughts on it. So it's called Hype and Magic: Turning AI into Products. So my background started before this. I wrote software in the financial industry, banks, Ernst & Young, all that. Worked at FedEx many years. Part of the time there was in IT and working, I helped launch their API program years ago. Moved into the innovation group where we did some work with IoT, putting sensors into high value packages so we could track them, to move tracking from old school to new school type tracking. And then since then I've moved into startups, and I've worked on natural language processing. 2 companies I've worked on, Tala, which is still around if you want an enterprise solution that's an enterprise bot that manages your knowledge base inside your company. That's Tala out of Boston. And then MessagePath, that's a natural language processing product as well. That's sort of like, what I did was I looked at all the text editors out there, because when you're talking about natural language processing, one of the things that's naturally going to improve is text editors. And I looked and I saw that all the text editors did spelling and grammar check. So, and they were more focused towards academic writing. And I wanted one that really helped me write a better sales email. I wanted an editor to help me write a better support response. So MessagePath is a solution that you install. There's 1.5 billion people in the world that speak English, right? And only like 300 million of them are in the US. And so if you have like you have a 400 person support team, and you want to help them reply to the customers, not only, grammar and spelling being correct, but all of the kind of edge cases and like idioms and those kind of things that help them have a better customer experience on the recipient side. On the sales email, we also built in a lot of things there too. So for example, it'll remind you if you don't have a call to action in a sales email. Nobody's ever done that before. It also looks at your tone to see, is the tone you're sending out to your customers the tone that you want to send out to your customers? And for example, it tells you are you talking about yourself more than the customer? So there's a lot of things that we're looking at around natural language processing for helping business communications that haven't been done before. So that's MessagePath.com. And this presentation is not about that, but I thought I would kind of talk about what I'm working on currently. A lot of the learnings that I've got in here went into that though. So check out MessagePath.com. So my background is also in innovation within FedEx. So I've covered a lot of different things there where I've worked in big data and AI and drones and 3D printing and a lot of different kinds of technologies. So I have a technical background, but the last decade I've really been more focused on the business side of trying to work with really, really smart people, figure out how to apply that into business to build something useful for customers. Also, I'll caveat for those, especially those that are technical in the room, that I'm not an AI expert exploring innovation. I'm an innovation expert exploring AI. So a lot of the technical things I don't go too deep into. I try to apply the things I'm seeing and what are the patterns and things I'm seeing on the technology side from people I've worked with that I can apply to business. So let's start with the overview. Let's start with what is AI. So here's a tweet that I found pretty amusing. What's the difference between machine learning and AI? If it's written in Python, it's probably machine learning. If it's written in PowerPoint, it's AI. So the joke here is all these business guys are going around with their PowerPoints and they're talking about AI in this very broad general sense. And as we all know, the real machine learning happens in code, right? So, but I will say I found this hilarious being an engineer myself for years. But I will say that there are things on the business side, both sort of the philosophy and the morals of it and also the business application that we're going to have to figure out on the business side. And I don't see as much conversation around that. I see a lot of really good conversation around optimizing models and data and how to get clean data and all that. And then there is some conversation on the other side around, application, and how do we make sure it impacts society in the correct ways and all those sort of things. And also, how do we make sure society understands what we mean in the industry of AI and not what science fiction movies tell them is AI, right? There's sometimes a gap there where everybody's concerned about a sentient being popping up next year, and we're just trying to get like this thing to do some pattern matching on question and answer pairs. And so AI, seriously though, the way I use it, and some experts may disagree, but just for the purposes of this presentation, to me it's just a big broad category of that branch of computer science on getting computers to exhibit intelligence, which generally means like helping make a decision, right? And then under that you have machine learning, and then you have deep learning, which has additional layers, making it more intelligent and making it called deep learning. So from the business side, though, the way I think about this is pattern recognition and prediction. So we can do a lot of stuff with pattern recognition and prediction, but really we're talking about classification, which to me falls under sort of a category of pattern recognition. And then prediction really is sort of pattern recognition over time, and we think, and so that kind of falls under pattern recognition as well. So you've got this really interesting technology that's developing where we have rigid systems in the previous years, stuff that I coded, and now we're moving into systems that are more intelligent about pattern recognition and with fuzzy inputs, right? And this is a lot of cool stuff, right? This leads to perception, insights, decisions, and automation that we haven't been able to do before. And the stuff that works, and generally I call this out, the stuff that seems to work is the narrow AI, where we're talking about specific domain and not general. And this talk is more about narrow and applying that. I think we're also moving into this intelligent automation age. So if you think about kind of where we've been, we started getting, 1995 was when the web browser came out. We had the internet before that, and then we kind of created a layer on top of that where we created this browser interface where we could connect people, created an interface for people that was more friendly with the internet, right? And then social, collaborative, and collaborative may be sort of the entryway to autonomous. We're splitting up using Uber and all these different applications, the workforce and the way we work. And then intelligent automation is we're taking a lot of these subsets of things that we do and we're slowly automating all of those. So we're starting this era of intelligent automation, which is really interesting. So I'll cover that in this presentation. Also, when we talk about AI in business, I like to separate this out because I think when we're talking about AI at a startup or AI at the product level, which is usually a startup, is usually developed around the single product, or you're talking about enterprise AI strategy, those are a couple different things. So I'm going to separate those out in my presentation. So if you're working at an enterprise, you may be a little bit more interested in what I say about AI in the enterprise. And if you're in a startup or if you're doing a product in an enterprise, you may be interested in kind of the AI startup stuff. So lots of AI startups out there. So this is about a year, maybe 2 years old, but we know that there's a lot of startups in a lot of different categories. I've kind of broken it out in the complexity. I've classified it myself into these three categories. There may be more, but these are the three that jump out to me. One is sort of incremental startups and products in AI, which means like I'm doing a thing already, and now I'm doing it a little bit better because of AI, right? You could say like, we had somebody reading a document and they were sorting it, and now we're using AI and we're sorting the document slightly better. You're sort of got an old use case, and maybe you're improving an old way of doing something in a new way. Then you have sort of startups that wouldn't exist at all without AI. So if you took out the AI, there would be no startup. So I find that interesting as well. And then tools. So these are probably the three categories, I think, if you want to do a startup or a product in AI that I think are where you want to figure out where to go. I think tools are a natural place if you're highly technical. Building a tool for AI or robotic process automation, analytics, I found really interesting because anytime you have a new technology put out there like the web, somebody always starts building, analytics on top of that everybody can use, and then you can kind of sell that as a product. The only warning I would say if you pursue a tool is that big companies may be pursuing these tools as well that are already kind of seeing the opportunity as well. So I'll just be careful about that. Incremental as well. Those may be obvious opportunities where everybody's saying, we were doing this yesterday and then tomorrow we're doing that. It's better because of AI. And that's kind of what I mean by incremental. It's we did something in the past and we're doing it better because of AI. And then core value may be just sort of new things that we may not have been able to do before. And there's
examples of that core value?
Yeah, there's definitely some overlap there. So I would say totally self-driving cars, maybe more core value, although because you're kind of removing, it's sort of a new thing. It's almost a new industry, I would say. So that would be an example there. So I'm kind of focused on core value, and this probably applies to incremental as well in some cases. But I'm going to focus kind of in that area on kind of some things that we were looking at when we were doing chatbots. Again, when we build new interfaces, that may be sort of a new core value for AI is when we get into machines that can talk to us and those kind of things. You wouldn't be able to have that new interface unless AI existed and was able to do those patterns. You can do it, you can imitate it, but you may not be able to actually pursue it. So AI, some key points for AI startups is sort of where is the data coming from? Where is your feedback loop? What is your day one experience? And are you really creating net negative work for what you're accomplishing for your customer? Examples of each of these, where is your data coming from is really interesting to me because if you're building a startup and all of this data that your startup is gathering is available to Google and everybody else, then it may be a little bit tougher to compete. If you're gathering specific data from your customers that not everybody has access to and it's more proprietary, that's probably where your benefit's going to come from having a startup in this space. And then where is your feedback loop? It's basically using what part of that data can you build a feedback loop, and we'll talk about that in a moment, to make your product a learning product, a product that improves over time. That's probably another benefit of sort of a newer type core value startup in AI is the product learning, is it getting better on its own? And day one experience is another thing that sort of jumped out doing an AI startup previously is that sometimes you have to do training to make your product valuable. That's something you want to think about earlier than later. You may want to build some way that you have current data that you pulled from somewhere that your product can be useful on day one versus selling a product to a customer and then you go in and say, okay, we need to train for 3 months on your particular patterns of your company, and then we become useful. They may be a little bit more skeptical over those sorts of things. And you run into that with any sort of AI product where you're working with large enterprises and you're helping them, automate some system that you have to pull their legacy data from to even get started. Whereas some startups, you can kind of have at least a template where you can be useful on day one. So it's something to consider. And then are you useful? Are you creating net negative work for the company where you're fully automating or partially automating something that they were trying to accomplish, right? So the AI flywheel, how many have heard of the AI flywheel? So the AI flywheel is when, oh great, I try to present stuff that maybe you haven't heard of before, so I've got probably a few things in here that hopefully you can think about. So AI flywheel is the theory around building a new product in AI where you start with data. Your data allows you to create value, which allows you to pull in more customers, which allows you to pull more data from them and train, which allows your product to learn, which makes your product more valuable, which in turn gives you more customers, more data, more customers, and you kind of create a cycle of that. So customers, you train, you learn, you have more data, you're more valuable, so you get more customers, and you kind of go in a cycle. Your seed data, to get all of this started is the kind of the question that comes up when you create it from scratch. So you're like, well, we're not useful until we have data. So where are we going to get that initial data to get the flywheel going? But the theory is, one example would be sort of Tesla self-driving cars. Elon's making the case now where they have more data than they have, I don't know, 100 times, or there's a multiple of more data, training data that Tesla has than the entire rest of the industry. And that's sort of what this is. It's every Tesla sold is a collection point for AI data, right? For training data, for driving. And that's kind of what you want from your product, is that whenever you sell your product, every new one is actually a node that's providing training data back to you. And now it's impossible or very difficult, perhaps impossible, for any other car company to catch up with where Tesla is, right? Because they've already trained like 1 billion miles or something on roads. And it's just every new car sold is a new node, a collection point for training data. And it's been that way since they've been in business, or since they've loaded on their AI capabilities. So you want to create that flywheel, because that creates the actual business moat. It's a data moat that you can use it for a business advantage, right? If you launch a business that everybody could just copy in 3 years, you could still have a good business, but you haven't necessarily created a useful moat. Augmented intelligence kind of plays into this. So partially what we're doing when we're doing AI is we're either automating something fully, or we're just augmenting something a human's doing already, which is very interesting. So there's this sort of user experience where you may not want to be interruptive to the user in order to train your data. So you may want to have a product that looks very similar to the product they were already using, so they already know how to use it. And then that actually trains the system over a long period of time. This is for natural language processing and for text-based solutions inside a business. This comes probably more naturally. But you want maybe for when your product is used, every usage is a training moment, is a way to think about it. So you have this augmented intelligence cycle where you've got the artificial intelligence that gets smarter over time. You're going to create as frictionless experience as you can, because the experience is also the training. And then we want to move cognitive load from humans to machines over time. So the goal is this, this won't work in every particular business case, but sort of the gold standard is, frictionless use by human, where they don't have to learn anything new. They're doing what they already do, and their activities are training it to be automated. And you're going to get close, to there. You can kind of think through where your obstacles are if you're not hitting that. And that's okay. You can still have a fantastic business, but it's good to understand your obstacles. And then I've got the 10 principles of intelligent agent design. At Tallo, we designed intelligent agents, or we were part of that, and starting in kind of 2015, where chatbots have been around for years, and now we're starting to think about what happens when these things become more and more intelligent. So you can Google this, 10 principles of intelligent agent design, and you'll find it online. But probably the most interesting one, I won't go through all of these, is, to me at least, is context aware. So I think when you're building these systems, really think about the input you're getting to make the product more intelligent. So context is going to help your product be the best it can be. The limited context, you're not going to have as much data. Maximum context, more. You can imagine having a virtual assistant that lives in your phone that's actually smart. You're going to want it to access your calendar and all of the context. Where is it? What's going on in the outside world? As much as possible for it to be as useful as possible. So context matters, as well as all these other things like being able to learn, etc.
Can you comment the transparent part? How you can actually be transparent?
So right now, there's probably a lot of different definitions of that. This is a high-level definition. The way I'm thinking about it currently is that, and it may not be able to be totally transparent, but as transparent as possible. So for example, if it made a decision, being able to have a log of the steps that it made to do a certain thing, allow appropriate access to information that impacts others. So the thing is, in the future, an intelligent agent may be making sub-second decisions. There actually may be a bunch of intelligent agents, I would imagine, communicating and collaborating with each other, making sub-second decisions about our lives. And so the goal of transparency is think about how part of the design principle for each of these agents should be being able to allow access appropriately to outside for humans to understand what it did in the past and as much as possible why. So that would be, to me, transparency.
So it's transparent to kind of experts, not the average people.
Well, laws may change that, right? I would say within a few years, transparency of any AI system, you're going to have probably starting in Europe saying it's got to be human readable to everybody. So at some point there'll be, and I'm really talking about a couple different things here. One is sort of the model. The concern we have in AI is, oh my gosh, how do I explain a model? There's a ton, it's like humans don't really make a decision, and then we're not able to explain our own decisions very well. What happens in the human brain is we make a decision, and then if you ask us why we did that, the brain actually makes up a story kind of retroactively.
Yeah.
And we've gotten along sort of okay with that for a while. It's not great, but so AI will have some of those capabilities, but when we do things like turn down loans and things like that, we'll probably get more into that. So there's the very difficult, which I think will get solved in some way, model, black box of the model, figuring out why that, and explaining that. And then there's sort of other transparency to me, which is more simplistic, more like, somebody being able to go in and look at a log of activity for one bot or multiple bots on what happened. And it may be an expert probably at first, right? But I would imagine building some sort of, thinking about when you're designing it, all of these pieces and trying to fit something in there that matches that as best you can with current technology is a good way to go. Because you don't want to have a bunch of independent agents running around making decisions and just no transparency to what's going on. So that was startups. So the key with startups, I think the main thing with startups really is back to creating an AI flywheel, creating a feedback loop, and thinking about your customer experience. One way we thought about it at Talla with frictionless customer experience is we had to figure out where we wanted our training to be. Every startup gets into this where you're like, in the chatbot industry in 2015 when I got into it, almost all the chatbots, the major ones that had funding, were people pretending to be bots chatting with other people. And the reason was because you can hopefully get that data and over time train something, and also it worked immediately where you can get funding immediately, right? And so everybody has to figure out kind of like where is it going to get the labeled training data in order to make it more intelligent. There's several options there. One is you can keep it all in your company or outsource it. You can also have your customer do it. If you can figure out a way, and this is sort of one of the things that we did at Talla, is if you can get your customer to annotate the data for you, that feedback loop is, they're naturally doing that for you, and they're annotating their own data, which is nice. Same thing with message path. When you use the product and it's like a proofreader, like it's giving you feedback, and when you don't accept some feedback, that's actually something it's learning and it's giving a feedback loop. So, but you're just like, it's how I naturally use it, of course. I'm accepting or rejecting changes to a document, but it's training. So, and it's natural. So creating as least amount of friction there as possible is good, and not having an overwhelming structural thing overwhelming your customer is good if you can not overwhelm your customer with those things. I don't know if it's always possible. So it's sort of on the startup. On the enterprise side, it's being used, enterprises looking at AI from all different perspectives. One thing I found interesting for AI within enterprises, really data within enterprises is the opportunities around what I call data arbitrage. And the way I define data arbitrage is you have the thing you're thinking about with the enterprise versus a startup is a lot of legacy data. That's actually the main thing you think about when you think about a big data project or an AI project at a 100-year-old company or a 40-year-old company, right? You've got messy. So the first thing you run into is the data is messy and ugly, and it's across a bunch of tables. Over history of time in all of these older companies, maybe you had a column in one of the tables that until 1975, they used this column and they had 2 decimal points. But then 1975, they created a whole new column in the table and they use 4 decimal points now. You've got ugly data that you got to clean up before you can even start having these nice conversations about feeding it into AI training and all those sorts of things. But the way I thought about data arbitrage was, do you have old data that's been used in an older context that can be used in newer contexts? So, for example, one example I'm not sure is around anymore is Uber. Uber has all this data around its cars driving everywhere, and it opened up a side business where they were experimenting with selling road data to cities to know like where to build new roads. So if you're an old company and you're sitting on this data, get creative about other uses of your current data that could be entirely new businesses is one way to think about it for older companies, I think. And that's the Uber is one of the examples. So data evaluation model. So another thing that's sort of related to AI, but it's around data science itself and data. It's that conjunction between data and business, and it has a little bit of AI in it. Is what I call the data evaluation model. And this is something I've been playing around with. This is, I haven't seen anybody else talk about this. So to me, there's this value of data sitting in old companies that maybe hasn't been valued, right? So you may be a $100 million company, but what's the value of the data you're sitting on and how do you value that? So I started thinking about how do I value data as an asset? And I came up with these categories. So time value would be some data is worth more in the future, some is worth less in the future, some is the same. So can you build a model around kind of, at least at a subjective level, understanding your data and whether it's getting more valuable or less valuable, so you can kind of build a model around data evaluation. Legal constraints. So do you have legal constraints around what you can use your data for that can impact your value? Context value, like I mentioned before, you may have been using it for one context in the past, but there may be 10 contexts you can use your data in that are all business opportunities. The quality of your data, like the cleanliness, like I talked about, like as companies age, their data can get messy if you're trying to use it all. Can you access the data? Where are you in the data stream of the sort of value chain of data? And the training value of the data. So is it useful for training something for AI? You can combine this and start discovering values for companies that they don't have already. This isn't built into valuations of companies right now. So this would even be interesting, like if you're a stock picker and you're looking at companies, this is hidden value that doesn't show up. So I'm interested in this model for several reasons. And it can also be used for enterprises to value their own data at some point to at least get an idea for it. Recommendations for the enterprise for AI. So this is sort of executive level. We talked about product and building your product in a startup. I also have a thing online called 12 Tips for Building an AI-Driven Product. You can Google that. It's not in the presentation, but it's sort of interesting. It's around sort of more tactical approaches to AI-driven products. So back to the enterprise, these are my sort of high-level strategy ideas for enterprises. One is to create your data resources strategy. So probably the first thing you're going to need to do is make sure you have a good catalog of your data and what the quality of your data is, because you're not going to be able to implement anything until you know. Design products that learn is another learning that we get. So you may be able to create a new product that's more valuable than if your product's getting more valuable every year from your customers using it, that's something to think about designing in if you can. And look for valuable data sets in your data, of course, that you can use for various things. Create ideas using the sense and respond framework, and I'll talk about that framework on the next slide. Utilize innovation and data science groups. I think we're seeing this more, so I started putting this together years ago. And I think companies are thinking more, old school companies are thinking more about hiring data science people. That wasn't always the case, where they're actually experts that can go deep on this. And utilize networked AI. So like I mentioned before, if you can have, depending on your product, if you can have these nodes that are collecting data from your product, could be a Tesla, could be some distributed system that you've sold to customers. If that data is being collected and centralized and you're learning from it, that's useful. So finally, the AI Sense and Respond framework for enterprises is this. So this is where we look at pattern recognition and prediction. Like I said before, I think those are some of the really broad areas where if you're just a business person, you want to think, gosh, what are the use cases for AI? Because when I talk to executives, a lot of them, they don't really know. They saw Terminator and they're just like, what do I use AI for? AI means a robot that talks to me or a chatbot that talks and it's like a human instead of a machine. And they don't realize what we're really just talking about is pattern recognition. We think that'll evolve over time because our brains are pattern recognition and pattern. Our brains are actually pattern recognition and prediction machines that are really, really good. But right now, pattern recognition and prediction, we're at the stage where you're just looking for business use cases. And then so sense would be more of what are your inputs, where are you getting your data, and what's the pattern recognition and prediction you can do with the data you're collecting. If you think about it that way, you may add features to your product partially to collect data. So you may think about that. And then the respond is the automation part. So you're making a decision, and then when we talk about automation around AI, from the AI perspective, what we're really talking about is some AI, some collection point collected data, could be IoT, could be something else. It went through an AI model, which made a decision. And then when we're talking about automation, it's that last part where it's like, oh, a decision was made. How am I responding to the environment dynamically? And so you can kind of put revenue generation and operational efficiency and start asking yourself questions around what customers are best. Oh, that's a thing we can get. We can kind of see what our best customers are from our data. And then how do we want to automate the response to that, automatically contact the best ones. You may want to automate processes or identify experts based on natural language that you have inside your company or other data you have inside your company. You can predict operational challenges as a prediction. So you have a fleet of trucks and maybe you want to predict that one of them is going to break down next week. You can start predicting things ahead of time instead of retroactively. And then you'll be building in a system not only to collect the data and make the prediction, but also to automate the response. So that's kind of the Sense and Respond framework for that. So thanks. I'm Will Murphy. I'm Will Murphy on Twitter, and MessagePath.com is my current project. Anybody wants to check that out? Do I have any questions?
Yeah, I'm in compliance and AI. I use AI to help determine compliance, but it's not a revenue generator, right? When you said legal constraint, I'm wondering what your prognosis is for someone like me.
Oh, I think it just depends.
Yeah, my question.
It really depends. I think so. Yeah. Well, so you're in compliance. Let me repeat it for everybody. You're in compliance, and I was talking about that legal constraints can.
So I use AI like NLPs like that to help identify data that needs to be separate.
Yeah.
But it's not a revenue generator. I'm not like building customer retention or So I'm trying to. I've been told there's good promise for it. So I'm just wondering, since it's not a revenue generator, is there a place for that?
Yeah, I don't know. I can talk to you afterwards. I'd love to learn more. So just to repeat the question, he's in compliance and he's looking for revenue generation opportunities.
I'll talk to you.
Is there opportunities in revenue generation?
I'll talk to you.
Yeah, let's talk after. So I will say this, I've had a little bit of experience in that. I don't think everything has to be revenue generating. But I think, so especially for AI, finding problem issues and identifying those can save you a ton of money and a lot of problems and a lot of headaches. Also, startups, if you're getting into that space around compliance and spotting issues based on pattern recognition, there's probably some big opportunities there. But I'll talk to you after. Question here.
So back to your kind of startup case, I'm wondering, do you think that the kind of startup should have kind of a differentiating data set, which the kind of people do not have?
Ideally.
Yes, but startup by definition, they don't have anything. So how do you actually start? I mean, do you suggest buying some data from some guys, or what are the best strategies kind of to start?
Probably three main ways that I can think of off the top of my head. There's probably more. So one is public data sets. So just getting started with public data sets is okay. So one thing we're looking at MessagePath is, like I said, we're natural language processing for business. We started off by hard coding a lot of different rules so that we're useful on day one. Useful on day one means you get customers that use you. Customers that use you is your training data. So if you have a good idea of how to build a good customer experience around either old training data or just hard coding it, that's fine. Then there's sort of public data. So we're looking at maybe being able to read legal contracts and get feedback on writing a good legal contract. That's public data that we can get and get the flywheel started just on that. And I think that's fine. But over time, what you can see is that as people interact with your product, what you want is, it's getting smarter as they're interacting. Those are a couple. So it looks like hard-coded, public sources, and then buying a private source would be another way to do it. Again, these aren't hard and fast rules. There's going to be tons of companies that are just doing something Google could have done, and they're going to be giant. And so they didn't follow the rules, and they're still fine. So there's going to be those. But I would say just when I'm thinking forward, I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, am I creating any sort of gap between me and somebody that could just copy what we do? So I think there's several ways to do that. You can kind of just, the way we did it at MessagePath was we researched best practices in writing, and nobody had ever built a text editor. So the way I built our first version with very little AI was I went and bought 20 business books on how to do good business writing, how to write the best sales email, how to write the best customer support. It was all written in books, but it was never turned into code before. So our starting point was just like, hey, let's get best practices, turning them into code, have a product we can sell, and then the product can get smarter over time. I think there's a lot of little niches like that where it's like, hey, nobody's coded up these best practices before just to get going. So you're at least moving the needle for the customer a little bit, right? And it's like, okay, now you can get going. So I don't know, you have to get creative with that first, and with the first round. In some companies, your value prop may be so good that you can talk your customers into giving the first round. So your first sale may be them giving you, I'm just saying that's hard. It's possible though, maybe in that negotiation where your value prop is so powerful that, you're partnering, or you're either partnering or you're going in, and your early customers are providing that data. So thank you.
Talk a lot about AI, data sets in terms of AI. There are other aspects of AI too. What other opportunities in the AI industry for startup or enterprise besides data sets?
I think that's the main one. I mean, I think the problem is with models. You could say, well, we're going to hire so there's two big categories. There's like our model that we're creating and our data. And I don't know that your model is going to be uncopyable forever, or I don't know that your people are going to be that much better than everybody else, where they're not going to have be able to create competitive models. So then you really get into, well, if the playing field on models is very flat, and like, somebody created a really cool thing with OpenAI and they're giving it away to everybody and then everybody's using it, or somebody over here, generally what's happening is the models are getting shared. Then you really get down to, oh, okay, so you're either competing on good old-fashioned business stuff, user experience and building a good company and good culture and, all those sorts of things, or you're also having a data set that nobody else has part of. And if you're improving that data set on a regular basis, that's probably one of the key areas of improvement for AI in any category, really, right? So if you're a medical device and you're using image recognition and your data set really decides how good you're spotting tumors or whatever, your model, of course, but like the way you're going to probably pull ahead is like, oh, we've gotten this effect. It's kind of like when we built social networks years ago. The key thing was like how many nodes are in your network, right? Whoever gets to, the competitive edge for Facebook is how many nodes are on their network. And so that was kind of the key thing. And it may be sort of the same for AI as how many nodes are providing you the data that's going to make your data set unmatchable by everybody else. So that's a concern, right? Because for enterprises, if you put together data with, so somebody like Google can hire the best talent, they can hire the best data, and they can have the best processors. And that may be another area where AI can compete. That's sort of common in a lot of places is your processing speed and all that. But it may be it may create a gap between haves and have-nots in some of business areas, because if the same business can hire the best data scientists and they have the best data that nobody can get, and they have the best models and they can get whatever computer they want to run, they can probably create some things that just nobody else can match. And so over time, the way I've thought about the data is, how do we think about that in the future? Though, do we create data commons is one thing I've been thinking about, right? So do we have a situation where, I'll give you an example, if the public finds that there's a bunch of car companies and somebody has a fantastic data set and the other car companies don't, I'm very capitalistic, and so I'm cool with competition, but you may get into a situation where we say, you know what, like for medical data, if you're a medical company, or maybe your car isn't crashing and everybody else's car is crashing for self-driving, it's kind of like, do we think about how to create data commons where like you can still run your business however you want, but do we force you to share your data, that's your model and your data across the industry so that everybody can, you're competing on other things than the safety of your data or whatever. So we may find that there may be points in certain industries where some sort of shared data set is needed so that we create a competitive playing field. That's just a crazy theory of mine, though. So, okay.
Yeah.
And I'll get you next.
You see challenges in scaling up a product because of the data capture problems in one environment is not replicatable on data capture problems in another environment. So do you see those kind of challenges for scaling up and replicating or productizing an AI project? Do you see those challenges that come across?
So, what was the question again? Do I see an issue with?
Yeah, because data capture is subject to an environment that you're actually putting
Oh,
your product onto.
right.
And how's the replicability of that particular product into a different environment? So do you see those challenges, and what are the ways people really overcome those significant challenges?
Yeah, that's tough. I don't really have an answer. So the question is, if you collected the data in one environment, probably under some assumptions at the time, and then you get into the future where you're wanting to create a product from that data, but maybe your viewpoint's changed. I don't have a good solution to that. That's just one of the many nasty things, especially at the enterprise level, that you run into when you start getting into big data and AI. That's part of the cleanup. I don't have any good solutions. Maybe some data scientists could take a stab at that. I had one in the back, and then we can come up front.
Just to your comment right before this question, what do you think then about the democratization of data? If you're talking about some haves and have-nots, and the whole idea is that you democratize the data, then what do you think about, when people talk about that?
Yeah, what do I think about the democratization of data? Did I cover you can come talk to me afterwards if I didn't cover your answer
Yeah, sure.
close enough.
I
I don't feel like I've got a good answer,
Yeah.
but you can come talk to me after. The democratization of data, I think it's case by case almost. I think the different industries maybe could be different. But when I think about things like health of a population, et cetera, it's a mix. Like you want people to be competitive because you want to inspire them to get advantages and to win. But also, I don't know. I suspect there's some room, and it may be case by case, for some sort of what I call data commons. And that would be sort of a centralized or maybe even decentralized way to tap into data in a secure way that doesn't have PII in it, personal information, that could be useful for an industry. And I haven't thought too much beyond that, but I suspect you could do something like that. The way I've thought about it is creating so you could use maybe a blockchain type solution. I don't know if you've heard of like homomorphic encryption, is where you can actually do math on a data set and not have to see the data set. It can stay encrypted and you can connect with it. There may be in my mind, some combination of those types of technologies where we can create common data sets that are relatively safe, but also useful for industry, for certain industries. But that's as far as I've thought through it so far.
So we should probably have one more question.
Somebody here.
Yeah.
So just wonder in your case, right, you're doing NLP, so when you try to spin the AI flywheel, right, you focus on specific industry, or you just generic business writing, or I guess it would be more effective if you just focus on one industry, right? But when you pick your customers, do you confine it to certain domain?
Yeah, you should, I think. We did it, totally. But so the question was, when you're choosing an AI, especially when you're doing training, should you pick a specific industry? And the answer is yes, generally. So with Message Path, we went a little bit wider because what we're also doing is we're putting something out there to see who shows up in the different categories. So as a startup, it's sort of the way I think about it in product is if you want to break the rules, which I'm not saying you should. So the common statement on this for AI startups is pick a super narrow industry, go super narrow, do training on that, and I think that's fantastic. Another way, if you want to sort of break the rules a little bit, is to start wide, and it's sort of like a fishing net, and see kind of what industries you're picking up, and then say, we had these several categories that are pretty good. With our pretty good solution, these people are like the most excited about what we're talking about. These lawyers all showed up and they're like, wow, give us more of that. And then you say, so you could start wide and then see who's upset that it's not a better product because they're using it so much. And then you narrow, you create the narrow then. So it's sort of a business way to test before you go narrow. But I totally agree with going narrow. And if you know from the very beginning, like if your founders are ex-radiologists and also have PhDs in AI, and you're like, we're going to do this thing that we know very, this narrow industry that we just know, then don't go wide, just do that. But like if you maybe have 5 different categories that are very, very similar, and they're only different by a little bit, then I would say maybe if you want to and you have a little time, go wide and then kind of see where the excitement is and then go narrow. Give it 6 months or a year and kind of narrow it down. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Well, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, we have to give another thing for the apply and agency.
Yeah, I'll be quick, just 1 minute. Thank you, Boris. Hi, everybody. I'm Alan, partner at the Fly High Talent. So it's my great honor to be the host of this event. We have great speakers and all your participations. So just a little bit about our company. We are a recruiting firm headquartered in Santa Clara. Actually, this area is called Fly-T. We turn this kitchen area to an event place. And our office area is just across the hallway, the other side of the building. So three dimensions to describe our business. We focus on startup, high tech, and agriculture background. Definitely AI is one of our main focus. I mean, that's where the future is, and that's where the gold mine is, right? Actually, right now we do have a couple of AI-related opening position at our fabulous company clients. So if you are interested, definitely we can talk a bit more later. Again, thanks for coming, and please enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
The other questions? Contractor, repair, contractor. Part-time.
Human in the loop.